Have you ever found yourself contemplating the act of thinking, like when you're riding the train or resting in bed, and suddenly your mind is juggling 5 completely unrelated things: past blunders, future plans, grocery lists, deep existential fears? For no apparent reason, it's as if your mind decided it was bored and turned into a chaotic circus. Here's the intriguing part. We've become so accustomed to this mental clutter that true silence, real silence, feels uncomfortable. It's as if something is missing, like we're not living life correctly if we're not constantly mentally processing something 24/7. But here's the key point. You're not flawed for desiring tranquility. You're not lazy for needing mental stillness. You're simply human. Thinking is a tool, a sharp one, but carrying it around all day will eventually cause harm. The truth is, you weren't designed to live entirely in your head, and most of the time, you're not even solving problems. You're stuck in loops, replaying scenes, arguing with imaginary people. It's exhausting, and half the time, you don't even notice it happening. This message isn't about clearing your mind or sitting cross-legged on a mountain. It's about something more practical. Understanding that constant mental activity isn't proof of awareness. It's often a distraction from it. If you've been feeling mentally drained, restless, or like you've forgotten how to just be, you'll want to pay attention. Once you understand why your brain does this, you'll never see stillness the same way again. Most people don't realize how loud their inner world has become because it's been that way for so long that it feels normal. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's healthy. We've normalized racing thoughts the same way we've normalized overwork, as if mental exhaustion is a badge of honor. If your brain isn't constantly buzzing, worrying, or problem-solving, you feel behind, like you're not being productive. But real clarity never comes from a noisy mind. It comes from the moments when you're finally not trying so hard to figure everything out. Think about it. Have your most powerful insights ever come while you were desperately overthinking in a panic? Probably not. They came in the shower, on a walk, while you were staring at the ceiling, zoning out. Not because you were grinding your mental gears, but because you finally stopped long enough for your deeper awareness to surface. Your brain is like a snow globe. Shake it constantly and you'll never see through it. But leave it alone for a moment and the clarity appears on its own. You see, thought isn't the enemy. Constant thought is because constant thought turns into noise. The more noise you have, the less space there is for actual awareness to rise. Awareness isn't something you force. It's what's underneath once the dust settles. Here's where it gets interesting. When you stop clinging to every thought, you start noticing how most of them aren't even useful. They're old, recycled stuff you've already dealt with 10 times. They come dressed like urgent problems, but really, they're just echoes. Leftover tension, half-formed worries that don't deserve to be held onto. You were never meant to live entirely up there, inside the mental simulation. That's why nature feels so good. That's why music hits differently when you stop analyzing it and just listen. That's why the best moments in life don't come with commentary. They come with presence. When you stop treating thought as the main character, you start experiencing life again, not just thinking about it. Here's something no one teaches you. Silence is not the absence of activity. It's the doorway to actual awareness. When you're constantly thinking, your attention is always 2 steps ahead of your body. In the past, in the future, in imaginary conversations, in to-do lists that stretch into infinity. You're rarely where your feet are. You could be walking through a park on a beautiful day, but if your mind is replaying an argument from 3 days ago, your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It thinks you're still in the fight. That's how powerful your thoughts are. But here's the paradox. Your thoughts can only shape your life if you let them run the show unchecked. You are not powerless to them. You're not stuck with the noise. You're just used to reacting to every single thought like it's a notification that needs opening. Most of the time, it doesn't. Have you ever had a random negative thought pop up and suddenly your whole mood shifts? But if you actually trace that thought back, it came from nothing. No real trigger, just a habit, a loop, a muscle that got too strong from overuse. This is where stillness becomes powerful because stillness isn't passive. It's not doing nothing. It's unhooking your identity from the mental commentary long enough to realize you're not obligated to think everything through. Some of your best decisions, the ones you felt in your gut, came from that space. You didn't overanalyze it. You didn't talk yourself into or out of it. You just knew. That's the intelligence underneath the mind. It's not chaotic. It's not loud. It's calm, it's grounded, and it doesn't need your constant input. Here's the part that changes everything. When you give yourself permission to stop thinking all the time, you don't become less aware. You become more. You start listening deeper. You notice what you've been missing, and life starts to unfold without needing to be micromanaged. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from finally being still enough to hear what's been there the whole time. Let's talk about something you don't often hear when people talk about overthinking. It's not just what you're thinking, it's the constant pressure to mentally narrate your existence. Waking up, there's already a dialogue. Eating breakfast, your brain's got commentary. Even while relaxing, your thoughts are asking, "Am I doing this right? Should I be doing something else?" It's like you're never really alone because the mind has convinced you it always needs to explain, label, and judge every single moment. And that constant noise isn't just tiring, it pulls you away from actually living. Because here's the truth. There is a huge difference between being in the moment and being in your head about the moment. One feels like breathing, the other feels like surveillance. You don't need your mind to constantly track, categorize, and analyze your life like it's building a report. You're not a machine. You're a being. You're not here to process reality. You're here to experience it. And that's why you're not supposed to think all the time. Because the more energy you spend narrating what's happening, the less you're actually there for it. There are entire layers of awareness that only unlock when you stop mentally chasing them. Subtle shifts in your body, emotions that don't need fixing, ideas that rise up on their own. It's like tuning into a radio station you didn't even know was playing underneath all the static. This is where presence becomes powerful. Not in some spiritual abstract way, but in a practical, deeply human way. Presence reconnects you with your natural intelligence. The kind that doesn't need a pro or con list to know what feels right. The kind that doesn't rush to speak just to avoid silence. The kind that notices more, feels more, and reacts less. When you're present, you don't need your thoughts to explain the moment because you're in it. And once you get a taste of that clarity, that stillness, that enoughness, you'll start to notice just how much noise you were carrying for no reason at all. You know what's wild? Most of the breakthroughs people are chasing, clarity, peace, confidence, aren't things you add to your life. They're what's left when you stop overcomplicating everything internally. We're taught that success and happiness come from doing more, planning harder, and mentally controlling every outcome. But in reality, it's usually about removing the noise that's in the way of what you already know, already feel, already are. The constant mental pressure to calculate your next move, that's not insight, that's tension pretending to be progress. Here's where it gets real. The people who seem the most grounded, the most magnetic, the most at peace, they're not running thought marathons every hour. They've simply learned how to trust their awareness without trying to dominate it. See, thinking is linear. It has a pace, a direction, a structure. But awareness, it's open, quiet, immediate. It doesn't chase, it observes. It doesn't predict, it responds. And when you start living from awareness instead of endless thought, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop needing to prepare for everything, not because you suddenly don't care, but because you've trained yourself to be present enough to respond with clarity in real time. And that presence, that's where your power lives. You stop being 10 steps ahead in your head and start being right here in a way that feels stable. You're not as reactive. You're less drained. And decision-making doesn't feel like climbing a mental mountain. It becomes natural, instinctive, fast, clean. But here's the twist. You don't access this by trying harder to be present. You access it by realizing you're already here. You don't need to earn the stillness, you just need to stop running away from it. That's why you're not supposed to think all the time. Because the real wisdom isn't hiding in the next thought, it's sitting quietly underneath all of them, waiting for you to stop long enough to notice. Let's be honest, silence has become suspicious in today's world. If you're not talking, typing, tapping, swiping, or planning, someone assumes something must be wrong, and even you might feel that itch, like you're falling behind just because your brain isn't multitasking at 100 miles an hour. But what if silence wasn't emptiness? What if it's where all the real stuff starts to happen? You see, the problem isn't that you think, it's that no one ever taught you how to listen to life without thinking over it. There's a whole layer of experience most people never access because their thoughts won't get out of the way long enough for them to feel it. It's in the pause between conversations. It's in the breath before you speak. It's in the space between ideas where you're not reacting, not planning, just being awake in the moment. And in that space, something incredible shows up. You become more intuitive. You move with clarity instead of second-guessing. You're less performative, more real. You listen better, respond better. You even start to enjoy doing nothing. Not because you're lazy, but because you're finally not at war with stillness anymore. Here's the truth most people miss. You don't need to fill every quiet second with thinking. Some of the most important shifts in your life will come when you stop trying to think your way into the next level and instead feel your way into it. There is intelligence in the quiet, a kind of knowing that doesn't show up in words. It shows up in how calm you are when something used to trigger you. It shows up in how deeply you sleep, in how slowly you breathe, in how much presence you bring to ordinary moments without trying to escape them in your head. You don't have to abandon thinking altogether. You just have to stop treating it like the only voice worth listening to. Because once you make space, once you allow awareness to breathe even just a little, you'll notice that life has been trying to speak to you the entire time. And it doesn't shout, it whispers. There's a strange kind of freedom that most people never get to feel. The kind that doesn't come from finally reaching your goals or fixing your flaws, but from realizing you don't have to mentally chase everything in front of you. You don't need to catch every idea, respond to every thought, or mentally dissect every situation to live a meaningful life. Because not everything needs a thought. Some things just need your presence. You don't have to have an opinion about every headline. You don't need to mentally rehearse every possible version of your future. You don't have to overinterpret the silence in a conversation. Sometimes it's just quiet, and that's enough. We've been so conditioned to believe that our value is tied to productivity, even mentally, like if we're not working upstairs, we must be slacking. But real clarity doesn't shout at you like a to-do list. It moves through you like water when you stop trying to dam it up with analysis. And that's the shift that changes your entire inner world. When you begin to see thinking as an option, not a requirement, when you finally start to trust the space between thoughts just as much as the thoughts themselves, you'll notice you become more grounded. Not because you forced yourself to be, but because you're no longer burning mental energy trying to control everything that doesn't need controlling. You speak slower, you listen better, you feel more connected to what you're doing. even if what you're doing is nothing at all. This is why you're not supposed to think all the time. Not because thought is the enemy, but because peace doesn't compete. It waits, and it shows up when you're no longer filling every quiet moment with noise. So, the next time you feel yourself rushing to fill the silence, try letting it stay just for a few seconds longer. Not to make something happen, but to finally remember what it's like when nothing has to. So here's the truth you probably weren't told growing up. You're allowed to be deeply aware without mentally narrating every moment. You're allowed to move through your day without constantly solving problems in your head. You're allowed to simply exist without having to justify every second with thought. We live in a world that celebrates constant stimulation, constant motion. We reward the loudest voice, the fastest mind, the sharpest comeback. But nobody tells you how powerful it is to not respond, to not engage every thought, to not chase every conclusion, to not fill every second with mental gymnastics. Because the people who seem the most peaceful, the ones who walk into a room and immediately calm the energy, they're not doing less thinking because they're less intelligent. They're doing less thinking because they've realized intelligence doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply watches. It listens. It waits for the moment that actually matters. And it shows up with clarity instead of clutter. That's what you start to unlock when you stop expecting your mind to do all the heavy lifting. Because awareness, real awareness, is already here. It's not buried under 10 more self-help books. It's not hidden in your next breakthrough. It's underneath all of it, quietly waiting for you to notice it again. So, if you've been feeling tired, mentally worn out, or like you're carrying an invisible weight, maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe you're just thinking too much about things that never needed thinking in the first place. Let your mind be a tool, not your home. And when that silence comes, don't rush to fill it. Welcome it like an old friend. Let it remind you what it's like to be here without needing to explain it. If you've made it all the way here, I want you to comment "I'm not my thoughts" below. Just those words. It'll let me know you actually felt this, not just heard it, felt it. And if you're open to it, share this with someone who's been living in mental overdrive for way too long. They might need the pause just as much as you did. Until next time, stay present, stay grounded, and protect your peace like it's gold, because it is, and it always has been.